Okay, welcome guys. Sorry for people who showed up on time. I am the one who showed up late this time. So I wanted to show you guys, oh, we got people joining. So let me check. Hey Oliver, I just got here. So I'm gonna go through the process of modeling out a basic car, right? And I'll show you the steps that I'm gonna go through to get there. Let me pull up our racing game scene because I'm going to pull the Sky car out of our Unity project and then look at it in Maya as well, just to get the size right so that I don't have to worry about rescaling it down the line. So here's our one incarnation of my racing project, right? So I can go to standard assets, vehicles, car, and we were using the prefabs, right? The prefabs have all of the scripts attached in the inspector over here, but all I need for today is the model. So I'm going to right click it, show in Explorer. That's going to get me to the FBX file, and I can drag that right into Maya. It's going to be ginormous just because of the scale difference between Maya and Unity, right? Now there is a way that you can change the scale of Maya to match Unity, but I won't worry about that for now. I really just want to see the size, and not even just the size, it's more just the space between the wheels. If I can match my car to the space between the wheels, like the wheelbase as they call it, it'll react more predictably in line with how the physics are set up on the Sky car model. Now you can get into the Sky car prefab and you can actually change the wheel elements here, or the wheel meshes as well. So if you want to change the rims and things like that, I found it to be a little more trouble than it's worth. Visually, who's going to really notice the wheels? Maybe if you're getting some nice up close shots, but for the scope of this project, right, I just wanted to have something that I've made to look at while I'm driving the car. So I've shared a zip file for you guys with all of these orthographic car models in a folder for you to look at. Notice how they all have front, side, and top views. This is going to be super important, right? It's a lot better to have these orthographic images than to have to work from photos. Now, this is because of lens distortion, right? As things get closer or further to the lens, they experience more spherical distortion because of the just the way that the light goes through the lens, right? So the other note that I did put in chat is that careful of these beautiful curvy cars for your first car modeling project, right? The more curvy and streamlined a car is, the tougher it's going to be to model. Whereas something that's a little more boxy or wedge shaped is going to make your life easier. That's a really nice one. This Dodge Charger is actually might be the one that I go for. So in order to get started, we've got two different options for setting up our Maya scene. What we're going to be doing is to use the quad view to see the car from our three angles and our perspective view. So we can either set up using the import image in the image plane options. If we're going to do that method, I think it's probably the correct method for us. I think I'll show you guys both methods just to be sure. Let me pull up that Charger. Actually, I like the look of that Dodge Charger. So either you can pull the image directly into this one, into your image plane, but the only issue there is that you have all four views, right? So if I just say, if I copy this image path that I have here, and I went to view, image plane, import image, right? I can then paste that path in here, find the image that I'm looking for, which is Dodge Charger, right? It's going to come in with all four views in it. So if I'm going to use this method, which is a good way to do it, first I want to chop up my images into four different images rather than having it all come in at once. So the alternate way of doing that, right, instead of having the image come in the built-in method, I could also create a plane in my scene. Right, and then I could create a material, place the image onto that plane by making a material. So I can make a Lambert since I don't need any shininess, right? Any metallicness. Link in the image file to my color slot. And I'm going to paste in and then navigate to that image. Alex is coming in. Some participants. Oh, okay. Quick attempt and then dropped. So if I use this method, right, first I need to apply this material to this plane, assign to selection, and then hit 6 on my keyboard in each of the views so that I turn on shaded display. Right. One issue you can see right away, right, is this image is stretched to be square, whereas I need to have it be exact, right? The whole point of using this is to be exact. So I can check the properties of this image, and under the details here, here's Alex. So under the details, I can check the width and height here, and I can scale this and check in the layer box so that the scale on the X and Y are approximately equal to the dimensions here, or I can just type in these dimensions, right? So 1500 by 783 pixels. Okay, so if the scale matches at the start, now I can also scale it down. So the reason I like to use this plane method is I don't need to go out to Photoshop to cut this image up, right? So using the other method, I'm going to have to create 4 different versions of this image. I want to save them all at 100% so that I'm not changing the relative size of, say, the front view versus the side view versus the top view, right? The nice thing about orthographic images is that everything is already scaled perfectly, right? So keeping that scale is very important. But with this method, what I can do is I can swap over to my multi-cut tool. It's going to be fun using Maya for the first time since a little while. And I can chop this image up within Maya without having to be too worried about going to an external software program, right? Just sometimes you're just like, oh, I've got the program open. I just want to have it work. Yeah. So once I've got one, the way that I like to do it is just to duplicate it, right? So I've got multiple, and then I start to delete, say, the faces of the pieces that I'm not going to need, right? So I've got one, so I can say, okay, this is my side view. Duplicate this again. Maybe this one will be my top view. just leave one with the front view, and then leave one with the rear view. Now I just need to position all of these things in space. Notice that the pivot point is going to be offset after doing this process. So we do need to reset the pivot, which is under Modify and Center Pivot. Then I can rotate E, turn on my angle snapping. It's been a minute, Maya, so let's see if I can remember my shortcuts or if I'm just going to do it manually. Rotation set. This one again. I want to center the pivot. Rotate it so it's even. It's only going to show from one side, so the front and back will need to be flipped. Again, this is just the kind of manual workaround, right? It does create this extra step of setting up things, but I like to do things manually when I'm first setting up, just so that I know that it's going to be right, that I don't have to necessarily worry about it. I do need to think about, though, that now that I've got the side view, say, lined up, that I could maybe go and change the scale. But I also want to remember to change the scale of all 4 of these pieces at once if I'm going to be messing with the scale of it, right? So it looks like I got lucky with the wheelbase is approximately the same. If I want to keep my sky car, say, visible while I'm modeling or while I'm setting up, right? Sometimes a good thing to do is just go into your hypershade. It's got the Lambert 1 assigned, and I can increase the transparency. It is that one. All right, that way, at least if I'm moving things around, I can see into there. And so this is pretty close. Happy with the scale and everything. So I can just move forward and make sure that I'm going to have everything scaled as is. So I guess I'm gonna have to do these one by one. Now I like to work with the, say, with the wheels on the grid line here. One thing that you'll run into, though, right, is you do have to think about, okay, the arrangement of this, right? It can't be like in front of the car, because then it's going to block my view of it. So another thing I can do, right, and another advantage of using this method rather than the view image plane method, is that now that this is immaterial, I can also increase the transparency of my orthographic view images and be able to see through them as well. Now the real trick is getting them all lined up perfectly. So let's rotate everything into place. Perfect 90-degree angles, right? And you should get an approximate result. It looks like the car came in with some layers. Okay, that's just the wheels aren't separate layers. So if I wanted to, say, have more control over orthographic view pieces, I could also create a layer for them, right? Create layer and add selected objects. That way, them. I can also do that quickly, right? Now, for any sort of orthographic setup, it's important to get as pixel perfect as possible when we're doing our setup stage. So a couple things that I like to do is find the exact front and back of that image, right? Or that where the car is on the image. Oh, I need to do a reset transformations because this guy's going all over the place. So no, I'm looking for if I can delete the history, should behave itself. History. Hope I'm coming through, guys. I haven't actually checked the audio. It looks like I'm getting levels. Okay, cool. Chat's over here. It's working again. Cool, thanks. So I do need to line up things exactly in the viewport. So let me just totally hide the car so that I can work without it for a moment. So again, I can add that to its own layer. Things can be on multiple layers as well. Car. I don't want to hide that. Like so. Alrighty. So front and top views. Let's center the pivot on this guy as well. If I want to have it snap to the grid so that it is exactly in the middle, right? I'm holding X to snap to grid points. But when I cut this, I didn't actually check that it was perfectly centered, right? So you can see the center line is actually off to the side a bit. So depending on how much you're eyeballing versus how much you've been careful with your cuts, right? You might want to do it one way or the other. Then I'm going to grab the side view and I'm just going to move the top view up and down until I've reached the point in the side view where the car is the widest. And I'm going to try to line very front up with top view. So instead of having kind of a box around where I'm going to model the car, when I'm starting off, I want to kind of like have everything X'd over each other just so that I can line it up as close as I possibly can. And there you can see, you know, I'm looking for, does the nose of the front view line up with the nose of the top view? So if this is the widest point, right, I want to get it as close as possible. Again, I should be bringing the side view so that it lines up with the center of that car. That's just going to make it a little more obvious when those pixels touch. And then I can check the back as well. All right, in this case, it's not quite where I want it to be. Let's see what's going on at the top. It looks like this is the spoiler, and then it does jut out a little bit. So that's the spoiler, and it juts out. So it might just be that the front does not have the bumper, right, quite where I expect it to be. It could be that that little bumper piece is the furthest point forward, right? Judging by the rear, that's what's happening. So if the rear is a little more accurate, I might go by that instead. But if we can get this nice and lined up perfectly, it's going to save us a lot of headaches later. Whereas if, oh, it looks like this is the opposite side, maybe I can flip this. I can't do that because it is not two-sided. So here I might want to cycle through cameras. See if I can get from the other side. Shading. X-ray backface culling. Oh, I know what I can do. Could maybe duplicate it and have one that is flipped. So I just scaled that into the negatives to flip it. Right, so if it's got a negative Y scale, that's where it's going to flip. All right, so again, I'm trying to look at it, make sure that the front and the back are lined up about as close as I can get them. Then I can move on to the next piece, right? The front view, move that in here. Now I want to look at the top and the bottom. So I want the very highest point on the roof to match the highest point in the front view, and potentially the bottom of the wheels to touch where the bottom of the wheels are touching here. So in this case, I might want to think about moving this over to where the wheels are, right? Getting the wheels lined up as well. So making sure that those, when it is in line with the lowest point of the car, right, the wheel bottom, that those pixels on the 2D image also touch. So again, some people dive right into this stuff and skip these kind of lining up and the meticulousness of this part, but it really does help having everything set up the right way first, and then being able to start modeling without having to worry about things not lining up later, because it really can have a serious impact on your project if things are not lined up. So rear view, this one's a bit tricky. I'm trying to remember how I can get it. Yeah, I can flip this as well just to test it against the front view and get everything lined up with the front view. And then I only have to really line up one of them. Okay, so that's the rear view done. View and top view should all be in place, right? So now I'm going to want to save. I might want to just start a new project here. So we'll say sure. Default workspace, that's fine. I don't actually use the workspace folders, but all right, so now that you have things lined up, it's still okay to move these. It's just that you should only be moving them along an axis that's not going to unalign them from their kind of buddy axis. So the top and the side views kind of are buddies in a way. They're going to strange ways. Right, if they're off to the side, that's fine, as long as I'm not bumping them up and down as well, because then I'm changing their orientation here. The top view as well, I can move it up and down, but not side to side, because then that would offset it from the back view, right? So it's kind of, the triangle has to, each side is kind of reliant on the one next to it. So just be aware, at this next stage, you can move things around, but only along one axis. Only one of the axes is going to be safe to move along. And so what you might see online is people make this kind of inverted cube area. So the car is going to be modeled within that space that is bounded by those three different viewports, right? So that looks something like this. Have the front and rear views at the back here. I could also move one of these over to the front, but I'm not going to do that for now. Then I've got all these on a layer here. So I also want to lock that as a reference layer R. And that way, as I'm modeling things and selecting things, I don't accidentally select the cars, right? Or the views. I only want to be able to select the thing that I'm modeling. So next stage, right, is get my viewports kind of where I want them. I wish I could swap this from this side to the other side, but rotate that camera. Let's see if it'll let me hardwire this camera in there. Okay, there we go. that side view is now from the side that I want it to be from. I can just move it all the way out. Okay, and then we're gonna switch to good old box modeling, really. We can show our sky car again if we want to check its size versus our other objects. And remember, if I wanted to show or hide some of the images or the geometry a little more, right, I can just change these material colors to be more or less transparent. Right? In the sky car, the only thing I really want from it, like I mentioned, are the wheels. I'm just going to reuse the wheels for now or build the car on top of the wheels. It also kind of helps your brain just to like have a reference point, right? Having the wheels as somewhere that you can have an idea of the chunkiness and the kind of level of detail that you might want to be going for. So all the parts that are not specifically wheels, right, including the mechanics, I don't super need to see inside the car. Another layer. Sky car. Let's see if I hide that. I'm just left with the wheels. Might have missed the headlights. That's all right. Let's add selected objects to hide them. And then if I want to dial the transparency back up or down, make it easier to see. So add selected objects. All right. So you can see with my side view, right, the wheels are pretty much lining up with how big I want them to be. And that just means that in Unity, I'm not going to have to do that extra step of like hooking the wheels up to the system again. I actually have a funny GIF of when I tried this one time, and like as soon as you hit play, the wheels all go sideways and then they start rotating like Back to the Future wheels, like they go into like flying mode, and then they just keep spinning the wrong way, and it looks really funny. So we don't want to necessarily have to worry about the wheels, right? We're already making life hard just by modeling out something. So we got a couple different approach methods for this. If we're going to use box modeling, we can either use extrude method or we can do insert edge loops. So I think for you guys, insert edge loops is a little bit easier to get into. So I'm going to use that method. Now it's worth noting that this isn't the only way to model a car. Some people will just go into a sculpting program, right, like ZBrush, to do a high poly model. Another way to do a high poly model is to actually to sculpt it with curve surfaces. So we had briefly used at the beginning of 3D modeling last semester the EP curve tool, and some people like to do, especially for say curvier cars, like we had looked at some of these old school cars, right? Now for something like this, a box is just going to work against you the whole time that you're modeling. So instead of a box, right, they'll actually draw along these curved surfaces as a spline and create a series of curved splines around the car. And then in a final step, right, they'll create the polys that connect those splines together. So it creates kind of like a mesh web along perpendicularly along those splines to create that nice wrapped curved surface, right? Plus with EP curves. Okay, getting an image. So I'll run through that again. So you open up the Hypershade editor, which is the sphere. I made a new Lambert, call it ortho or car orthographic. Then I have a couple options here. I've already getting a lot of clutter. Here's my organize button. Rearrange graph. So I could say just drag this image directly into the hypershape. That's one way to do it. And then hook up the out color to the color here. That can bring an image in, right? And that's what I did here is I created a material with the car image on it. Then I created a plane. And I assigned that image to the plane. The thing is that with this method, it is going to come in stretched, right? Because I was not working from a perfect square. So I would check the properties of that image. I look under the details and I can see the dimensions here. So 1003 by 1281. I'm going to type that into the scale, 1003 by 1281. See if that looks right. Okay, looks like the scale came in. So once the aspect is okay, right, I've got just the aspect ratio there, then I can scale it up and down as I need it, but it will keep the aspect ratio. On that, from that point, I go to the multi-cut tool and I actually just chop this image up. So that each part was in its own polygon face. If this one is really close together, I might make a detour here. So it's not going to be perfect, but that's all right. Let's see if we can squeeze through this gap. Cool. I don't think I chopped any polys, hopefully. So once I've got it cut up like this, then I just duplicated it a couple times with Control D. All right, however many ones I have, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different views. I think, okay, the side views are different because one is in convertible mode. And then I went into face mode, and then see, I just deleted the ones that I didn't need. And then I did a modify center pivot. All right, the next one, deleted the extra ones. Modify center pivot. And then from there, right, I took these and I arranged them in the center of the graph here, making sure that my rotations were all perfect. Yeah, so let's just do the front and side for this one. Right, so once I have at least 2 of them next to each other, I can also scale things into the negative to flip them. So I was showing from this point, the goal is to make sure that the very back and the very front of the car are as pixel perfect as possible. And so first I need to make sure that I'm in the center with this side view. So I like to move the side view so that it is lined up, say, with the center of the windscreen. That's my center line. Then I move it up and down until I can see that this front bumper piece, right? In this case, I need to be a little bit careful because these little 3 knobs here are probably these lights, right? So I need to make sure that this main bumper part lines up in the front and that the bumper also lines up in the back without scaling things, right? Because the original image was already scaled perfectly. So if that's the rear bumper, looks like the front bumper is too short. So I might have to get or look for another piece that's going to inform me where the very front is, right? So I can also move it over here to this tire well. And maybe that's going to give me an idea of like, all right, that's the front of the tire piece here. And does this one look right? Yeah, that looks right over there as well. And it's almost lined up perfectly with the door. So I can be like, okay, let's move it back to the center. From there, I moved the top view down. And I moved the side view out of the way. And again, that created this sort of open box shape here. So let me just hide these. So it left this kind of empty space that I now can like model within, right? Because now I have kind of a shoebox here of space. The other thing I did was I made a new material with some transparency on it. Right, and that's going to be what I use to actually maybe model out the car. So let's switch it over to this one, I suppose is a good one. So I can just dial, oh, that one is the actual car. I guess I'll make a new member. Send to the cube. And don't forget, anytime you have an image in your scene, right, it's not going to display by default. You have to hit 6 in order to turn on shaded display. And that turns on this tiny little icon here with the checkerboard. So let's see, am I getting transparency? No transparency, there it is. So with a little bit of transparency, then I can see through it while I'm working. Okay, so now I need to start thinking in 3D terms, right? And I'll start using my orthographic side, front, top view windows a little more, because it's going to be easier for my brain to digest. Okay, like let's just scale things one kind of side at a time, and thinking about like what large shapes are turning into what other maybe smaller shapes, right? So if I'm going to use the edge loop method, right, I'll start with the cube here, and I'm going to stretch it so that it is the entire length of the car. Maybe minus some details, right? I could always extrude some of these pointier details. So maybe I'll do it just under the full length so that it's just getting the real meat of the car there. Okay. I can also start swapping into vertex mode, right, to get things nice and aligned with the widest points. So now I have kind of the bounding box of the entire car, at least in the side view, right? Then I can switch gears or switch my thinking. Okay, let's check out the front view. I need to disable the grid. That's that little icon here, just so I can see it. And I also probably don't need to see these wheels at all, just now. So the trick to this orthographic method is to get into the habit of using movements and really just scaling along one axis at a time. And we had talked about this a little bit in 3D modeling, right? Where I never really want to be scaling or moving things like in 2 axes at the same time, right? If I move something on 2 different axes, it can sometimes look fine from one angle, and then suddenly you check it in 3D and it is like an absolute disaster, right? And you have to end up doing things over again. So the trick is, like anything else in Maya, Maya's going to fight you. It's going to fight your creativity the whole way, right? Just take it slow and try to do it the way that it wants to do it, I suppose. So for insert edge loop, right, we've got, we could either just go to the multi-cut tool, and if we're in a window, right, we can hold Control and it will automatically switch into edge loop mode. Or there is an edge loop tool up here, insert edge loop under mesh tools. And that's going to do the same thing, right? If you click and hold, it will give you a preview of the edge loop, and letting go will commit that. So I guess I prefer the multi-cut just because I don't feel like I have to commit until I'm ready. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to look for areas where there's a change in height, right? So I like to start from the side view. And let's look at the roof, right? So the roof, the high point is right here. Probably just add a cut along there. There's another change in direction here, change in the angle, change there, right? Then it goes pretty straight along the side. And we can do the grid as well. Right? If I feel like there's some curvature here, I can think about that. I can also look at the bottom, right? But right now I'm just looking at the top of the car. And I can start adding edge loops in the major points of interest where things are changing directions, right? I'm getting a little bit too close together with these kinds of cuts, right? I want to try and keep my cuts as wide as possible to start with, and then as I move deeper into the process, I can start putting them closer together. But it's always going to be a bit of a learning process, right? There's always going to be a bit of ebb and flow to whether things are working or if you need to backtrack or redo things, right? Okay, so now I've got some cuts. I can switch over to vertex mode. And again, I don't want to get too distracted with making things beautiful or fixing things too much yet, right? I really just want to be careful about everything and be lining things up one axis at a time. So I can grab these verts. All these are going to get moved down. This one as well is getting moved down, right? So I'm also just concentrating on the top right now. I'm going to get it so that I catch all of these outlines. I'm not going to worry about the blower here, this air intake, because I can extrude that. It's going to make it a little bit more sense to do it that way. But here, you know, if I start to see I'm getting areas where I need an extra cut, right? It's not a big deal. I can just go back and cut that in a minute. Yeah, so I get all my top areas lined up. And I was like, well, there's actually a bit of a curve here I didn't spot before. I can add in an edge loop there, grab that vert, and again, I'm just moving it along one axis here. I don't want to start moving things back and forth just yet. Okay. Okay, back half of the car. Start to capture that outline, right? And just to catch the silhouette and start to actually pull the model into space. You can check my perspective view. I'm already, right, I kind of can start to see the windshield taking shape there. Alrighty, so next thing, you can check the bottom. Got some extra verts down here, but I'd like to keep these sections nice and strong with cross cuts, so we'll just leave them there so that they are reinforced. If I notice that there are areas like here on the door where there's a nice alignment, right, I can start to think about how I'm going to use that wheel well. There's a couple ways to do a wheel well. I might cut those out with a Boolean, I think, in a little bit. So instead of you know, worrying about this cut shape right away, I can delay that for a little while. So at the front here, right, we're clearly having a spot where things are changing directions. So now I need to think about cutting the car in half in a few places, just so that I can start grabbing the silhouette of the very front and the very back. Yeah, that's not quite fair. Okay, so we have something like this. And it's up to you if you want to switch to, say, the top view. It's actually good to put a center line cut. I think can I snap to grid? I think I need to be inside of the insert edge loop tool in order to snap to grid. Let's see if, okay, so I can't actually snap to grid while using the tool. So I kind of eyeball it. I swap to my vertex mode, select that center line, move tool, and then I'm going to snap these to the grid. So I'm holding X. I want to be able to see the grid at this point. So blind without my with all this stuff turned on, but it looks like I got lucky and I did hit the center point there. And again, I can start to think about, oh, okay, I've got a cut now. Let's try and move some stuff around so that it more closely matches. Right, I'm seeing here as well, okay, that indent there might also work better just as a Boolean, right, to slice it in, or thinking about this as like maybe an extrude later, I can just extrude inwards and then do some cleanup. Fortunately, extruding inwards does create cleanup issues. All right, now I've forgotten about the back of the car, so at the bottom, let's go and fix all these parts, figure out where some of this stuff goes, right? And you get some weirdness or issues here where it looks like the line is going in two different directions. Sometimes at that point, it's worth checking on Google, right, to see if you can find a better angle of the car, a better view of the car. I don't know if I have the year on this particular one, but I think this looks like it, right? It's like a 69 or something. So I want to just make sure, you know, what's going on in this back area here where it's close to the door. This is the General Lee, the famous one from, ooh, what's the name of the show? It's definitely an 80s American TV show with this car in it that made it famous. So it looks like over here, right, it looks like it's an exhaust, but it's actually still part of the body here. It's got that chunky feel to it. So when in doubt, right, and especially on an older car, it's a lot harder when you do something like a concept car that hasn't even been released, right, and has limited numbers of images available online. Dukes of Hazzard, thank you, Nathan. It can be a lot harder, right, without reference images. When you've got a lot of reference like this, in fact, it's probably a good idea for me to, you know, start pulling these images down into a reference folder, or to use my image ref stuff application to get these just right. But I'm not sure why it feels so chunky there, right? It's a bit odd. Here, I'm just going to eyeball it for now. I can come back to those sections. So a little bit closer. Now I want to start to iterate on it. So getting the front view right, I can see I'm going to need to bring in the top of the roof inwards, and then the bottom here inwards. So I'm going to need some more vertical cuts along the car. I can see from the top view maybe if there's any ideal place for that line, because it does change slightly as it goes across the car, right? So this is also an area where I'm going to tweak the verts left and right once I've got that line. Another issue, right, is suddenly I'm faced with no longer having a perfectly symmetrical car. If I make a cut on this side, right, there's no guarantee that when I make this cut over here that I've gotten it just right. You can get close by, what is the shortcut? It is holding Shift and Control at the same time, and it will, sometimes it pops up with a little percentage line. And there it's actually like snapping 10%, 20%, 30%, 40%, 50%, etc. So if I'm like here, 10, 20, 30, holding Shift and Control. Right here, 10, 20, 30, holding Shift and Control. Oops, I missed it. But already it looks like something is messed up in my top view. Maybe my top view is not aligned. Is there not a mirror tool in my, yes, there is mirror. It generally works after the fact. So it'll be like after I've cut something in half, then I mirror it. That's at least the bug-free way to use it. The way that works properly, though, I'll show you now. First, since we're doing something a little more risky, right? Anytime we're relying on an algorithm to solve a problem for us, we want to save. And it looks like I might have forgotten to line up my front view and my top views properly. So I might need to unlock some of these guys. Delete half. Yeah, so it's similar in Maya in that we're going to delete half of it, and then we're going to mirror the other half. The only thing is it doesn't work like a mirror modifier in Max or in Blender. Right, this is the mirror tool here. It will mirror it and it will stitch it, but then it's permanent, right? And any changes that I make on one side won't reflect. So instead of the mirror tool, we use the duplicate special tool. And then we're going to create an instance of this object. And the scale is going to depend on which direction it's reflecting over. So I got lucky here, but the scale in one of these needs to be -1. In my case, it was the X scale, right? So now I have two versions of the object. This is the real version. This is the instance. But anytime I make changes on one, it will reflect on the mirror side, right? So that's duplicate special underneath the edit menu. And you need to hit the little box to open it. So a little bit backwards in Maya that they make you sweat over the small stuff like mirroring, which is like, duh, everybody needs to mirror all the time. Maya, can you just give us a tool? That'll work, right? So here, I'll look at the front view and I can see that maybe it's because I lined it up after the fact. But now I need to be careful, right, of making sure that everything still lines up perfectly. So center line, this needs to get bumped over ever so slightly. Okay, looks all right. And then top view, it's still centered. Okay, gotta hold your breath for those parts because it could be a little scary when you realize that something is not aligned properly. Okay, so I've got the mirror working. Got one cut along the front view. Let's add another cut because the roof does slope down. And already I can see it's going to get a little tricky on this part because we've got some chunkiness in here. All right, so as soon as we start to have diagonal lines running through, that's also where things can get a little bit hairy, right? But we want to just stick to our habit of scaling things along one axis, trying to make sure that we've got enough cuts in there to support things, right? If things start to look weird, it might just be, say, that I've got too many things selected or that I'm unintentionally making my own life difficult. So the windshield, the problem here, right, is that I don't have a side cut to support that. So let me swap to my side view and start to think about where the actual edge of the car is, right? So since I have some geometry there, I'm also going to try hit this line on the side view. Get all these guys nice and placed. Looks like now I might need to start thinking about moving things back and forth, right? But I'm going to hold off just, I don't want to get too far ahead in too many places. Looks like the back is pretty much a flat. Flattened out shape. Okay. So now I need to think about this line here so that I can scooch the roof in. Just deselect to be sure. And start making some cross cuts. Since I don't have a full edge loop here, I'm just going to cut along the line that I need, which is the top of the door. That's going to be the edge of the door. Looks like I'm going to need the actual door here. So let's just give it an extra edge loop here because I can see this needs a bit of curvature, right? This window area will have some curvature. Start thinking ahead maybe. Alrighty. Let's check again. Here it looks like got some interesting shapes going on the roof. So we will need to check our reference a little bit later. But for now, right, we have enough geometry that we can look at our front view. Maybe at least start to shift things in. Again, I'm only working on one axis at a time because I don't want to get too distracted, right? And it's going to look weird for a second. Right, I'm going to have to double check here that I'm not making too much damage. Right, but I want to try and avoid the temptation of moving things in two axes, right? Which in this case, I mean, like, I don't want to be moving it this way and then moving it down as well, because that could suddenly create a mistake, right? But if I decide, okay, now I'm in perspective view, say like this is going to be the edge of the windscreen, right? Then I can start to be like, okay, well, I have that on my orthographic view. I'll move it in two axes here, and then I'll try and align it there. But it can get risky quickly because already I need an extra cut here. I can see this line, right, is the edge, but the windshield actually connects more like here. So back to Mr. Multicut. And two options. I suppose I could add an edge loop all the way around, or I can start to cut into this one and sort of guesstimate, okay, if this is the halfway point. Again, I feel like I'm taking a bit of a risk here. So this stuff, right, oftentimes you just need to try it out. If it doesn't work, you can always backtrack. But as you start to get to the curvier parts of the car, this is the kind of problems that arise. So instead of that temptation, I'm just going to see if I need to do any more alignment from the side. See if bringing some of these guys closer in is what I need to do. Or if I'm upsetting something on the top view. Looks like that could be a line. But I actually do need a second cut all the way around there, right? So I can see now, looking at it, the back has also got an extra line. If I look at the top view, this line here. Okay, so that gave me a whole bunch of extra geometry here. And I just need to do some mental gymnastics to figure out which one is going to be where on my orthographic view, right? So start to move some of these to get more of the line. But again, as I start to move things in two axes at a time, I'm taking a risk, right? Because now I'm getting more into that sculpting headspace, right? Where I'm just like, all right, let's try and move things that they follow a nice curve, Um, the worry is that sometimes you can break another curve unintentionally while you're fixing one. Yeah? So the more reference you have right at this stage to check, okay, how much like hips are here, the back, right? I'm probably gonna need another cut going underneath around here. So I can start to look for other lines that need a little bit more curvature. Maybe something that cuts around. And start to find more lines to give me some of those curves. And then I can see already in my side view that I need to like bring this curve downwards because it is quite flat in this hip section. I'll try my best to follow the line around back to the windshield. And then I can get back to just tweaking things that are on a single axis rather than trying to mess too much with two axes at the same time, right? So I can see now this shape is starting to make sense, right? That I do need to be careful of breaking it. Don't break it. Or is it say just break it? Don't worry, just break it. All right, so let's do an increment and save. So now we've got a teeny bit of curvature on here. I can say, all right, let's take a look at what it looks like when it is actually solid. So either changing the material or going back to the material that I'm using, turning off transparency just so I can see the actual shape. And I'm like, all right, things are looking up, right? It's starting to actually look like my reference object. Check who's messaging me. I'm getting dinged on Discord. Okay. No big deal. But yeah, this stage is tricky, right? Because you are switching from the purely technical cutting mode, right? So now you're kind of like working with a piece of clay, and you're kind of want to be able to move things around as your eyeball tells you to, rather than relying solely on your brain power, right? So it does start to become more of an artistic stage as you start to add these curvier areas. But again, I picked a nice boxy car, so we try to minimize the amount of time that we have to spend like guesstimating, right, or guessing where things should flow, and just try to line them up exactly with the art. I can always come in here, say in my front view, right? It's getting a little bit crowded in here to see what's going on. Just need to remember to avoid the temptation to move things in multiple axes when I'm first setting them up. So even here, try to hit the outside edges of that car first. If I've got a strange line, I just need to check where that is. Like, okay, probably needs another cut around here to soften that edge, right? Think about either maybe adding a triangle here, see what's going to happen if I'm going to add an edge loop, right? It looks like that's a safe bet, actually. But now again, once you add more complexity, right, you're also giving yourself more work. So be careful adding too many edge loops. Oops. And then this slot, they all need to be lowered. So this, remember, was going to create that kind of hip area. But the angle there is not going to be as clear as some of the other spaces, right? So let's say, for instance, here, this needs to move over. I want to try and eyeball which spots are going to be aligned with which other spots on the artwork. But it might take some pushing and pulling. These actually need to go inwards a little bit. Here, which means that these need to go in, right? And then it becomes a cascading effect, right? Where you move one thing and now all sorts of things need to be juttered and tweaked in order to match the rest of it. Yeah. So we stick to our guns, to our artwork for as long as possible, but it gets tough, right? It's not always going to be picture perfect or how you imagined it. So when it comes to these trickier areas, right, sometimes I will take a break from that spot, for instance, and work in a spot that is still looking very boxy, right? Like this nose and the tail. Might just be like, well, things are getting a little bit too crowded in here, a little bit too close together. It's probably safer for me to jump out to one of these other areas, right? Create some more cuts and some more detail. So this is an iterative method, much like you would iterate a game, right? You want to look for the weakest point, make some small improvements in that part, and then come back to the more difficult part as it reveals itself as a less than stellar piece of the puzzle. Yeah. But I'm pretty happy with the overall chunkiness of the shape here. It's got that muscle car heftiness or heaviness to it. So again, let's do an increment and save once I'm in a happy spot. And we can think about those wheel wells. So I'm going to make a cylinder. It is going to need to be a lot more curvy. So I will increase the number of subdivisions here, maybe to 12. 12 is usually like the minimum for a nice curve. Let's rotate this over. It's 15 degrees to get it flat on the top. And I can start to think about the size of these wheel wells. I have my tool set to object. I'll swap that back. And so these I'm going to shove into the car approximately the inner width of the wheel, right? I can kind of see here, okay, I've got a part here where the wheel well ends. So that's as deep as it needs to go. Here, I can also set this to be the same materials that I can see through it. I think it was Lambert 5. Another one for the rear. And then start to reshape it, side view. I try to get those same curves. Here I'm kind of destroying my cylinder shape, but it's only just because I only need the top of it, right? I don't actually need the bottom half of the cylinder. As long as I can get that curve looking approximately the same, that's going to lend itself to the actual model of the car so that it will look correct. once I've got my cylinder, I'm going to Boolean cut this out of the second shape, right? So again, anytime I'm doing something risky, I save it. I just save a lot, you know, to reduce the risk. Now, the other thing, right, is that this car model has become complicated with lots of different cuts and tweaks. Boolean does a lot better when you've deleted the history of an object so that it can perform that operation a little bit, like it's a little bit more fresh. All right, so let's try Boolean here. I'm going to go to just mesh, Booleans, and then difference. See if it pulls the right stuff. Okay, it did not. It could possibly have an effect that I'm using the instance side instead of the actual side. There it goes. So I like using the legacy Boolean, but that's all I wanted, right? Was that cut. Now it still would have another cut here, right? I could extend this edge loop on the inside of the wheel well so that it has more of that indented. So, you know, there's like a lip over almost the top of the wheel, and then it continues upwards. Let's see if I add the sky car back in here, right? So there I can see like, okay, if I've got this wheel, it's really going to be in here, and it needs a little bit more space on the inside, right? And then the outside kind of overlaps the top of the wheel. Car invisible. So let's do the back as well. Try to get it lined up and then get a nice shape in there. Okay. Bottom half, again, doesn't really matter. We do want to try and line it up again with this front so that we can see approximately how far the cut would go in. Also, sometimes with these muscle cars, right, the rear tires will be larger than the front tires. Can't quite see that in this version, but maybe check some of these. Looks like they're about the same. Okay, cool. Makes life a bit easier. So again, I've made one Boolean operation on this. I'd rather have a clear history so that I don't have to worry about it. Hit apply with the same operation, and it worked nicely. Did delete the other side of the car though, interesting. So I'll have to go and do another duplicate special. But actually at this point, I think it's worth taking a look at it. So do another increment and save. Let's use the actual mirror tool this time. Looks like I need to open the settings on that to get it to work properly. I thought it was just under a mesh. These mesh menus in Maya, I have been praying for them to fix the Maya interface for so long now. I just don't think they're ever going to do it. Mesh mirror, there you are. Okay. So it looks like I just need to change the direction this time to positive. It was set to merge the border vertices. And it looks Looks all right, but we can't really tell until we see it in action. So let's do a file export. We can sometimes use the sense of unity, but this is more for where you have a complex scene with a lot of objects. I do like this game exporter though, because it brings it up a different looking menu than the save menu. So if I just do export selection from my directory, I had linked in, that's the wrong link. So then I'll go back to project, find the assets folder, choose show in Explorer. So now I have the link to my assets folder. Paste that in here, hit enter. That's the directory I want, and we're going to call it Treasure 01. Let's check some of these. We don't need skinning. We don't need blend shapes. Connections, embed media, can leave it. It's fine. Hit export. Pop back into Unity. Now, if you want to align something perfectly the first time, you should just be able to drag it directly on top of it, like so. Now it has brought in my my see-through texture, right? So I can extract from prefab, see what's going on with that texture inside of Unity. Just tell it, don't be transparent anymore. So it's now a child object of my car, which is what I want. I can turn off the sky car. I don't want to actually turn off the whole thing though. I just want to turn off the body and a bunch of other stuff. For child. All right, so now we've got material. Let's get it nice and orange like the Dukes of Hazzard one, right? Test it out. Oh, great. AI is stealing my sonic ring. Oops, there he goes. We're letting him off into the wild. Run free, little car. Right. So there he is. He's showing up. Of course, if I want to say start to texture this, right, I can think of doing a UV unwrap. So I'm just going to check the UVs. Maybe I'll just start with a default UV automatic. Right. I will export it again, right? I need to have the UVs inside the export if I want them to show up. So what I can do is I'll replace it over there. I can also just pop open Substance, import it into Substance, create a little texture so that it's got a proper windshield as a different color, right? And I can put the Dukes of Hazzard logo on there if I want. But really, for this project, I don't need you guys to go in much more detail than this. This is only 900 tries, right? Of course, the more time that we spend on this, the prettier it can look. But for now, let's just see what we can get. Charger. Create a new Substance project, right? Like so. Let's look for smart materials. First thing we do in Substance is we bake texture maps or bake mesh maps. Okay, it's all good. Bake, bake, bake. That way we can get the ambient occlusion, and it will also work with smart materials now. So if we wanted to do like a really shiny, let's open the layers tab here. Just plain aluminum. What does that look like? It's a bit rusty. also edit this layer, right? Get it closer to our orange. Yeah, a little flame orange there. Then I want the windshield as well. So let's look kind of glass. We've got glass visor. Might work. Then I need to add a mask and swap over to the fill by polygon selection tool. This one. And I want my polygons fill tool to be white so that I can just start clicking where the windshield is. Pop, pop, pop. There, I'm not, it's not quite there, right? I should actually just add some more cuts and then it will a little bit better, but for a starter texture, it's not too bad. There. I don't know what the back looks like. What does Google say? It's got like it goes all the way to the edge, huh? Ain't perfect, but pays the bills. Right, then we're going to export textures. And since I've got the assets folder still copied, I'll just pop it directly in there. Tell it that it's going to be using a standard metallic texture, I believe. Back. Looks good. We don't super need it to be 2048. It can be a 2.4 texture. Back into good old Unity. Now the texture files will be in here. Pop, pop, pop. We just need to assign them to the material ball. Albedo. Metallic. Oh yeah. And normal. It's funny that I came in green. I suppose maybe it's reflecting the landscape. Oh, we're getting some some pixelation on there even. And I don't like where my main camera is. I can't even see all my beautiful work, right? Oh, these AI cars are so angry. Oh, but in the scene view, it looks nice. There it goes. And since I have metallic on there now, right, it catches the light quite nicely. It goes around. So yeah, I mean, that's the kind of getting started process, right? Obviously, I need to spend a lot more time in here cutting out, say, the headlight section. And you saw how, in Substance, if I want to just use this polygon fill, that I would add cuts that are closer to where the hardware actually is in real life, right? But I could just drop out of polygon fill and go more into painterly mode, right? And maybe get a harder brush. Harder brush. If I paint this, I want my brush to be dark black, not white, right? So I can get in here and kind of control it a little bit more if I'm using brush. If I want to just speed racer all the way through, right? Having the cuts in Maya will let me just kind of fill polygon shapes with the polygon fill tool right here. So little bit further, right? I could start to, maybe I want to add like headlights in here. Right, I can pick a random color, draw some headlights, brush, white, right, pop, pop. And I don't necessarily have to worry about getting too fine um, of a texture, right? As long as I have some sort of unwrap, an automatic unwrap, it'll do an okay job. But you do notice that in game, right, wherever there are seams in my the unwrap, right, there are also seams on the texture ever so slightly. I'm not sure why I'm getting this overall pixelated little dots here on my texture. Must be something to do with that actual albedo file. Albedo, why are you betraying us? So there's a bit of pixelation going on in there. Maybe that's what's causing it. Yeah, and I think monster trucks would be a fun way to do it. You know, if you want to get a little bit more crazy with your cars, or have like, if you want to do a tank, for instance, like I think David mentioned to you guys that you can just strap the gun onto your cars. I'll show you how to do it so that you can actually get a car with mouse aim, so that you can like have a turret on top of the car and just like point and aim at other racers and just blow them out of the racetrack, right? I'll post that on the Tumblr in case some of you guys want to play with that over the weekend. But I think this is a good start, right? We've been going like an hour and a half, so I think it's a good place to end this one. If you guys want to get more into car modeling and you know want to spend some time on this, I can go back to this model and we can start to look at adding more details. But we kind of hit the basics, right? That you get the overall shape even in an hour, right? Like it took a while to set things up, but then once you get that overall chunky shape of it, then everything else is just for your own, you know, your own sanity. If you're very like detail driven and you want the perfection, you can go for that, but you can also just kind of pull the trigger, export it to Unity, and then is it good enough? I'm happy with it. Especially if you get rid of the other sky car, right? And instead of having one hand modeled car next to, you know, a professionally modeled car, to just make them all the same, right? So that everybody's using the charger rather than having two different cars. I guess it doesn't play with the prefabs. Then things are also just going to look fine. You know, like nobody's going to question it because that's the level of detail that your game is, right? Like you've decided on that style. So again, style is only the mistakes that we can live with ourselves, right? That's all that personal style is. It's not about being a master for 500 years of you know, worth of design tutelage. It's just what kind of mistakes can you live with when you look at your own art? Whatever that is, that's your style, right? It could be really dirty and slap bang, or it could be very meticulous and detail oriented. It's not a huge deal as long as you're consistent. People won't bat an eye. Yeah. So hopefully that helps, guys. Again, if you want to work on this stuff and shoot me some drafts or show your progress, or you know, tell me that you ran into problems and stuff, we can also work through those together. But this is the long and the short of it, so we'll call it for there. Yeah. Any questions off the bat? Or are you guys good? Yeah, I recorded this, so I'll pop it up on my YouTube and I'll upload it. Cool. So thanks, guys. Yeah, we'll take baby steps in Maya, right? We're going to get more into Maya in the second half of the semester, but I didn't want to like overload everybody. So have a good afternoon, have a good weekend, and I'll see you guys next week.